Pastor Dax, it's your time. Sound check.
Okay, praise God. Good to see you. Hope you got a good rest. And we're going to look at some things. I was singing that song, Power of the Blood. That's a good old one from when I was a child. And well, I mean, I don't mean it's a good one. It's a good one, regardless. And I remember when I was younger, we would sing that song in our Pentecostal church, and people would run around the sanctuary. They would just get up and start running around the outside. And I looked for a half a second. I thought that was going to happen here, and then I realized very quickly that wasn't going to happen here. Are you with me today? You got to listen because my jokes are just getting started. My congregation, they look at me like, should we laugh? And then I said, yes, you better laugh because it's not going to get any better than that. They don't get better, they just get more. So, bless you, bless you, bless you. Okay, so I want to make a comment. Okay, so I'm talking about this next generation. Primarily, I've kind of shifted all of my focus to that. So that when you see me stand up here, you are you should primarily see someone reaching for the next generation. Now it's not, and I say this to my congregation all the time, and I told you yesterday that most of my congregation, we have about one-third, one-third, one-third. I started thinking about it. One-third under 30, one-third between 30 and 50 years old, and about one-third 50 and above. Now, I want you to hear this if you're going to pastor, especially if you're going to reach the next generation. The worst thing that you can have is a church filled with the next generation, because they don't know what they're doing. So when I began consulting, they used to say you needed to have a target demographic, a target, like we're going after the lost, and we would say, what does the lost look like to you? And they would say it's between 18 and 25, never heard the gospel before. They go, okay, fine. What we recognized quickly was that you could never get more than 25 or 30% of your target in the church before you couldn't minister to them any longer because they represented too much. Does that make sense? So you need older people in your congregation who believe in the next generation, who will walk with them, show them. So you can't just you say, everyone in my congregation is 25 years old. If you were a pastor, just go. You're not going to go anywhere. But if you have, let's just say, 50 25-year-olds and 50 30 to 50-year-olds and 50 over 50 years old, now you've got the perfect complementing system in your church. So you want an intergeneration or a multiple generation church. Young people, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. that's perfect. The problem with most churches is that all they have now is maybe parents, mostly grandparents, and some grandparents, great-grandparents, but no children, no kids. Okay? With me? So I'm here to represent those children that are missing in the churches across America, across the globe. I'm here to speak to you about them and the observations that I have made and have gotten from others as we collaborate together to think through how will we reach this next generation. And so some of the things that I'm going to give you might feel awkward. They're not bad. They're not evil. You would not say they're evil. You would just say they're awkward because you're not used to them. And so I was talking yesterday, I said, you know, the world is changing and we have to change and we have to do it quickly. And it made me think of my travels in Africa in the beginning, maybe 25 years ago. And I remember walking through the airport in Nairobi, Kenya, and I was, at that time, I mean, I had some money, and the church was doing well, but I didn't have a cell phone because they were just so expensive in the United States. I didn't have a cell phone. I mean, anyone who had a cell phone was, at that time, was extravagant. Like, what are you, like an executive of some kind of, like you have to have access to people all the time. You know, who are you, James Bond or something, right? And I'm walking through the Nairobi airport, and every village person in the airport had a cell phone. And I was so perplexed because they're so poor. And they would be talking on the phone, stupid stuff, like just burning minutes. Like, hello, how are you? Oh, yes, I'm fine, thank you. Where are you? Oh, what's happening? Oh, what's going on? Just stupid stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, they're just burning minutes. How can these Africans be so extravagant with cell phones? And okay, so I get home and I start asking questions. Now you know what? Do you know why Africa had cell phones before the United States had cell phones? You know why? Because America had telephone poles with wires on them. We had what we called then Ma Bell or AT&T, and they ruled the communications. And for cell phones to take off meant that they weren't going to use the telephone poles and the wires. But every undeveloped country in the world, all they had to do was build a cell phone tower, and they had access. They had no infrastructure, they had no telephone poles, they had no wires, they had no one employed by the people who ran the telephone companies, and they just quickly here's a cell phone, what do? Plug it in, talk on it. Hi, how are you? I'm from Canada. And it was crazy. Now what I'm saying to you is that if you can make this leap, in my analogy, churches are like the people who have the telephone wires and the telephone poles and all of the traditions. And to do something new in the church means that everyone who's used to using the telephone poles and the wires doesn't have a job anymore. I didn't say it would be easy, but I think you're understanding what I'm saying. So, the emphasis of the church that exists is to keep it the same because that's what we're used to, and that's how we have always communicated, and everyone has their place in the system already, and no one wants to lose their place. Yes? You don't have to like it, I'm just asking you to say, yes, it's true. So that when the emerging generation comes to Jesus and says, we don't need your hymns, your traditions, your coffee pots, your communication systems, your special music. We don't need the way you take an offering. We don't need your systems. Now listen, we're not talking about faith or belief here. We're not talking about Jesus in any way. We're talking about how we do it. Follow? How we do it.
Yes.
You're going to seminary and you're learning how to do it. And they're not equipping you for how you will have to do it in the future. They're teaching you how you will hold on to what's already there. Okay, so now let me give you an example. In the United States of America, you know what the hardest thing to do is to get a pastor for a church like this. And it's a wonderful church. Any church in America who says, the pastor who's been here for my church 30 years, we want a new pastor, and we want a young guy. We want a young pastor filled with enthusiasm who loves Jesus and will lead us into the future. And you know what those young pastors are saying? Why would I go to your church and pastor that church of old people when I can start my own church because I don't have any of the infrastructure? All I have to do is put up a cell phone tower. And so the biggest movement within the Assemblies of God, bigger than missions, bigger than the Assemblies of God used to be a missionary sending organization. It still is, but the biggest, most powerful component, and listen, the General Superintendent of the Assemblies of God, Doug Clay, he's a good friend of mine. He pastored the church where I grew up. I mean, I know him very well. I know all the leaders of the denomination. I talk to them all the time. And what I'm telling you is not anything that's hidden. They're very open with it. World missions, the emphasis on sending missionaries is almost, they still have it, but it's the biggest emphasis is on raising new men, young men and women to be church planters who will go into cities where there may already be 4 or 5 existing Assembly of God churches and plant a new one. And within months, at least a year or two, for sure, their churches are running significantly higher than all of the other churches combined. And that's just something to think about. Now, I'm not predicting that here in the Philippines because the Philippines is not the United States of America. However, what I'm suggesting to you is, and I told you this yesterday, many times we go into a church and they'll say, well, you do an assessment and the church has, reached its peak. There's 100 people. Let's just say 100 people. And in the church, there's no young people at all. They're all 60, 70, 80 years old. And the church has reached its plateau. They still give the missions. They still have all kinds of good programs. They still have coffee and donuts on Saturday. They still, have men's breakfast. They have pancake dinners. They do all of it, right? They serve the community. There's all kinds of things, good stuff that's going on. It's not that. But they've reached the point where people have started to die, and there's no one to replace them, and the church begins to dwindle. And the first thing that they notice is, we don't have enough money to pay for most of this stuff. But the church is paid for, everything, all the bills, it's just, okay, we're going to hold on until we die. And so they say, well, will you go in there, Pastor Dutch, and, shake them up? And the thing is, I can shake them up, but they can't hold on to it. When I walk out of the room, all the energy walks out of the room. And I say, what are you doing about what we talked about? It's just too hard. Nobody wants to do it. It's too hard. And so I say, after about 2 or 3 visits, shut the doors, sell the church, give it to a church planter who's going to do something with it. You think that's harsh? Maybe it is. But remember, the goal of the church is to be the redemptive agency of God. And if the church is going to be the redemptive agency of God, we have to do redemptive agency activity. And as nice and wonderful it is for all of the people to gather around and have a pancake breakfast, and I'm not poking at you guys, that's what we do in the United States. We're going to have a pancake breakfast, and everybody's invited. Bring a friend. It's like, who wants to go to a pancake breakfast? Nobody wants to go. No young person. You say, who goes to the pancake breakfast? 16 old guys. And what do? They say, well, we're going to have a pancake breakfast prayer meeting. You know what they pray about? You know what they pray about, don't you? You get 16 old guys together and you say, what are you going to pray about? You know what they pray about? They pray about their health. Yeah, they pray about, oh, yeah, I can't breathe right, my eyes are going bad, my elbow hurts, you pray for me, brother. I got prostate cancer, I don't know, what medication are you on? You know. And does the idea that there's a generation that's dying even cross their mind? No. No, because it's not even on their radar. It's not even in their visibility. All they think about is me. Now I want you to just think about the churches that you attend. I'm not talking, I've only been to this church, and this is a great church. I'm talking about where are the churches that you go to where people are excited, thrilled, over the moon when someone new walks through the door. It's rare, is what I'm saying. You know what people say when they walk into my church? They've been in church all their lives. And they may even be church hopping, which I don't like. But they're coming to church and they say, we're overwhelmed. And I say, what? And they say, we have never been greeted like this. We've never felt so welcome in a place like this. We've had 5 or 6 people come to us and talk to us and sit with them and ask them questions about their lives and about their families and, you know, all of the things that are going on in their life. They say, we're overwhelmed. We're not sure what to do about this. And I say to them, you're welcome, because I spent 30 years building that. Now, okay, it looks like you're either upset with me or done with this. Johnny, will you put that skill set, actually put the practices, 2 things, just go ahead and put them. I'm going to give you, over the next day, today I got this session and the next session, and I'm going to give you what I believe they're not teaching you in seminary. How's that? Let's talk about, we'll frame it that way first. What they won't teach you in seminary, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the competencies, the skills that are absolutely necessary for you to reach the next generation, if you want to, and to reach any generation for that matter. But if you're going to reach the next generation, if you don't have these skills, I don't care what kind of Bible scholar you are, someone has to listen to you first. You got to get them in the room so that they'll listen to you, or else what difference does it make how much you know? You ever hear that expression, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? As I'm writing, as I'm walking up and down, this is no criticism on anyone, I just notice it because that's what I do, I notice stuff. I notice people walking back and forth here by this church, and I'm thinking to myself, who's talking to you? I'm not saying anybody isn't. Maybe they are. Who's talking to you? Who's reaching out to you? Who's creating an opportunity to have a conversation with you? So, yeah, down, oh, you're gonna do something different? Okay. However you want to do it. I was asking these young boys as they're pulling these slides up, I just want you to see them so I don't have to remember to say them all the time. So they'll be up there, you can write them down, I'll give you anything I have. But I was talking to these guys in the back of there, I said, what about basketball? They said they played basketball last night, and which is great. I love basketball. Basketball guy, and I grew up as a kid playing basketball, and then I was on a team. We were state champions, state runner-ups. I like to say we were state champions, but we lost. But we were in the game. But it was a big deal, right? We had a great team. I was on the team. I wasn't some big star player, but I was on the team. And I remember trying out. We would have during the summer. You'd play basketball, and coaches would come around, and they'd look and watch and see, who's got it, who doesn't, who can shoot, who can't. And you pick up games and you throw, around a little bit. And mostly it was a bunch of guys gathered around, there's a hoop, there's a ball, and I bet that's mostly what you guys did. Maybe not, but I bet that it probably is, at least some of it. You got a hoop, you got a ball, and you just stand around and just shoot. And we call that in the United States, I don't know what you call it here, but we call that, what do you want to do? Well, let's just go shoot around. Right? We're just going to go shoot around. What are you going to do? We're just going to shoot around, and so there's no game, there's no strategy, there's no nothing. It's just, you get 2 or 3 balls and you get about 5 or 6 guys and you just shoot around. And we used to have a rhythm, as long as you were making them, you kept shooting, and as soon as you missed, you had to get the ball up. So we just shoot around, shoot around, shoot around. And the coach would come into a place like that and he would say, hey, boys. We say, yes, coach. And he goes, you want to just shoot around or do you want to play a game? And we'd say, He said, you guys want to just shoot around or you want to be a team? We say, we want to be a team. But as soon as we went from shooting around to being a team, everything changed. The coach got us out on the floor, made us run so hard we were puking. We had to get up early in the morning. We had to practice. We had to give up girls. We had to do all kinds of stuff to be on the team because we stopped shooting around and we started playing on a team. And what I'm saying to you is that sometimes some of these skills you're going to go, we can do that. We do that when we're shooting around. And I'm saying there's a difference between doing these skills as a team and there's a difference between doing them as people just randomly out there. In other words, there ought to be some organized, intentional system that you create, an environment that you create in your church for these skills and practices to be exercised and executed. So that if you're a pastor of a church, you ought to, in your mind, have a plan, a process, a system already developed that everyone in the church knows that when someone new comes into this building, here's what happens. Now, you're looking at me like you've never heard anything like that on earth. Have you heard something like this? I know it's early. I'm tired of pushing. How many want to be a pastor? 2 of you? What are the rest of you doing here? Do you all want to be pastors? Is that true? Yes. Are you? Okay, so you're preparing to have a church, right? Yes? Speak to me. I'm getting nervous now because I think I'm talking to children if you're not going to be pastors. Do you want to be, some of you already are pastors? How many are already pastors? Raise your hand, participate. How many are not pastors? Put your hands up. How many are not pastors but want to be a pastor? How many just found out that they were serving donuts over here and you came in the building? 1. So now here's what I do when I go into a church and I'm talking to a church about the next generation. I say, what system do you have? What system do you have for people who walk into your building and it's their first time there. What's your system? Now, you don't have to answer me because most of you probably don't even have a system or haven't even thought about a system. But if someone walks into your church, you better have somebody who says, here's what we're going to do when we have a new person walk into this place. We have someone who will greet them. It doesn't have to look like this. I'm just saying this is what a system looks like. We have someone who will greet them, welcome them, help them find a seat, introduce them to the pastor, introduce them to the pastor's wife, introduce them to the associate pastor, help them get to a Sunday school class if they want to, help them get their coffee and their donut if you have them. You're going to sit with them and you're going to ask them questions. How many have that system in your church? That's what I thought. Okay, so now what I'm saying is, if you don't have that system, you're not prepared to reach the next generation. If you can't do that, you will never be able to do what I'm talking about. And if you're not worried about it, then I'm saying you don't even have a chance to keep your church alive. Your church will die before you do. You'll be looking for employment as a janitor someplace, or working in a bank, or a financial institution, or something like that, because the church won't be able to afford to pay you, because the church will be so old and dead that they have no money left. That got your attention. Right? And this isn't about having a job, this is about reaching people. So, okay, so let's begin with some of these competencies. These are the practices. This I'm just going to go through just so you can see them. Most of you would probably say you would agree with all of those, and I don't think I shouldn't have any disagreement with anyone here. But what I'm suggesting is these are the practices of Jesus, and the seminary is not teaching you to preach those, they're teaching you to preach doctrine. And if you preach doctrine, you're going to lose your church unless they're all doctrine people, like, they like doctrine, and if they do, they're already probably dead. Jesus was not about statements and doctrines. Jesus was about people and stories and living his life in front of other people so they could see it. So you preach about forgiving other people. Jesus said, if you don't forgive, I don't forgive. You know what the number one problem, and this is what many scholars and many pastors would say, I don't know if it's absolutely true, but it's certainly a big one. They would say that the number one problem in the church in the United States is that people will not forgive one another. They hold grudges, they hold bitterness, they hold evil intentions. They don't let go of stuff. So you go into any church in the United States of America and you see one family sitting on one side and another family sitting on the other side, and the pastor stands there impotent to deal with it because they're both strong families in the church, and to address that grievance before God would cause them to lose half their congregation. Pastor Malaysia, am I right or am I wrong? How do I know what that looks like? It's because when you do it, you find out fast what happens. So you say, hey, this is not right. You have to forgive. You have to settle. You have to resolve this conflict, and you cannot hold a grudge. And if you do, and I see you, I will rebuke you until, if I have to, I'll rebuke you from the pulpit. You say, man, that's harsh. No, what's harsh is to allow that to go on and destroy everything you're trying to build in that church. Because let me tell you about the love of God and the Spirit of Jesus Christ. You cannot grieve the Spirit and expect him to stay in the church. And if you allow that to go on, the Spirit is grieved and he leaves. You're still in the building doing religious things, but God is not there. Nor is the next generation. Because they grew up with those grievances, and that's why they left. This is not true religion. This is not pure theology. This has not got anything to do with God. You guys hate each other. You're in feuds with one another. You fight with one another all the time. You You mock one another. You gossip against one another. You do all kinds of vile things to undermine someone else's authority. And you expect God to be here. And you expect your children to listen to you and have any respect for you at all. And they don't. And they run. That's a big deal. Now, when I preach it, that's what it sounds like. And my people, and I say, listen, I said this right from the very beginning. If I hear you gossip at my church, I say my church, our church, the church I'm responsible for, if I hear you gossip, I will call you out, and if you don't repent, I'll throw you out. And you say, did you ever do it? Twice. In public. I couldn't do it today because I'm not strong enough. But I remember carrying one guy out because he just wouldn't repent. He said, you have no authority over me. You don't have any authority. You can't talk to me that way. I said, you're right. I probably can't, so you don't belong here. Let me help you out. He says, I'm not going anywhere. I said, ushers, come help me. I'm carrying this guy outside. Call the cops. And you think that the people in that church didn't remember that? Right? They go, oh, let me tell you a story about Pastor Dutch. New people are going, what? He what? It's so long ago, hardly anybody remembers it. But I'm saying that's how big of a deal it is because I knew that if I allowed that to be there, is like allowing sin to manifest right there in the building. And here I am preaching repentance and preaching the gospel and trying to bring redemption to a city. And my own congregation is undermining everything that I say by not forgiving one another, by holding grudges. I bet you I say that at least, I preach that somewhere in my sermon at least once a month. Someone will hear me say, and listen to me about those grudges. You cannot have grudges, and I know some of you have been hurt, you've been wounded, people have treated you badly, and Jesus says you have not resisted to the point of, shedding blood. So you forgive, and you walk away. People will come to me after those kinds of things and say, hey, my father raped me, my mother abused me, my dad passed me around as a child and used me as a sex toy. I can't forgive him. I said, you're absolutely right. It's very difficult. But you know what forgiveness is? Forgiveness is taking away the penalty that they're due. So you say, what do you do? You should be in prison. But I'm forgiving you, and I'm no longer requiring payment from you. Now follow this. I'm no longer requiring payment from you. Now what that means is that if you really forgive someone, you are no longer interested in their harm or their impugning their reputation or cutting them down or gossiping about them or having bad things happen to them. Right? You've released them from that. They may not be able to receive forgiveness. That's not on you, that's on them. But you can release it. And you can say, God, by your grace, I no longer require payment from them because you paid that payment for me. And if I don't release them from that payment, Jesus says, then you cannot rely on my payment for you. And he says it straight out. If you refuse to forgive, then you cannot be forgiven. Why? Because we don't understand our own sin and the pain that we've caused others that God has forgiven. We think our sin is different and better than someone else's. You got to forgive. And then you go on and live in unity. The whole point of the church is to live with all of our diverse expressions. Everyone and all diverse, everyone. That's what I love about Pastor Revelation when you say, I want everyone to come in. All my brothers in Jesus Christ. Okay, surely there's things that we align with, right? Jesus is Lord. You know, those fundamentals that you gave the other day, of fundamentalism. We can all agree that Jesus is Lord and Jesus died for our sin. But we're all unique. We're all different. You know, we all have different ways of expression. Some are extremely artistic. Some are overwhelmingly management, you know, and they want the details, and others are just like, oh yeah, come on down, you know. And they just dance around the aisle, and they have not a care in the world. Everybody comes to the party. Jesus says, if you can imagine the Apostle Paul, his primary work was what? To unite Jews and Gentiles together as one temple in the Lord. That was the deal. And that's what you're doing. You're uniting diverse people, diverse gifts, diverse sets of people to one person. Vulnerable relationships. Think about this. You say, are we friends? We talked about that just a little bit. This is under pastoral ethics a little bit. So we say we're all friends, we're friendly. We can have dinner with one another. We have known you since I was a child. But do they really know you? So if you're a pastor, now this is just this. If you haven't experienced this and you're going to reach the younger generation, you will come up on this one quick. Because the younger generation, they don't hedge. They tell you what's going on. You say, what's going on? They say, man, I've been involved in pornography. And the older pastors go, let's talk about something else. A young woman will come to you and say, I've been raped. A pastor, a friend will come to you and say, I've been having thoughts that are not good. Now, in the church, and I get it, it's true and it's hard because we're in the church and there are rules. But in the Assemblies of God in the United States, if a man or a woman confesses to having those kinds of things in their lives, you know what happens to them? They get removed from their churches. And when a board member comes to you and says, I've been watching pornography, or I've been thinking about someone else besides my wife, or I've been cheating my employer, or whatever it may be. Do you know how to handle that? Do you know how to bring reconciliation? Or do you just say, you're out? Pete has a great story. He said it, and I'll just remind you of it. He said he went and he was in church and Jesus came. He's 13 years old. Jesus came and he was just beside himself. And then, he slipped back into sin and he just fell away and no one was paying attention. And he's walking the streets and he's walking in sin. And all the people who saw him were clapping their hands and rejoicing that he came to the altar and got Jesus. Now here they just stand there and they go, look at that poor sinner kid, Pete Snyder. And who's going to help him? Who's going to come alongside of him? Who's going to say, I'm willing to risk myself? Listen to me now, friends. I'm going to tell you some stuff. I want you to hear me. I had this family in my church. They were magnificent. They gave so much money to the church they could have almost paid my salary by themselves. So I liked them. They were special to me. And they loved me. But they were old school. They were old-time Pentecostals, and they were very rigid, and the church was changing, and new people were coming, and there were young women who were coming who had lost their families and because of drug abuse. Some of them had resorted, this happens all the time, many had resorted to selling their bodies for sex, prostitution, so that they could pay for their addiction. They would steal. When they were high, they didn't even know where their children were. Children's service come in and take their kids back. And here they come to the church and they're saying, Pastor Rutch, can we find redemption here? Are we welcome here? I said, yes, absolutely. We'll help you. And we did it. About 2 months ago, we had this beautiful baby celebration, baby dedication, where the foster parents, the new mom who finally got got her kids back. We all came together. She got her kids back. She's got a job. She's, working, on building her family back. And her children are steaming there. Everybody's beaming. And all the church is just rejoicing. And it's just one of those magnificent realities of being a pastor where you go, God, thank you, Jesus, that I get to see this redemptive activity of your powerful love, right? And everyone's coming back together. And so I said to this woman, this has been a few years ago, and I said, Brenda, she says to me, Pastor, we want to start a Bible study. I said, oh Lord, please don't. You remember we were talking about Bible study? I said, oh God, please don't do that. You want to start another Bible study for women who are already believers, who just want to sit around and drink coffee and study the Bible? Please don't. She said, well, what do you want me to do? I said, Brenda, and I gave her 2 or 3 women their names. I said, Brenda, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to open up your heart to these 3 women. And I'd like you to come alongside of them, and I'd like you to share your life with them. And I'd like you to help them get themselves together and show them what it looks like to follow Jesus. I want you to show them what it looks like. Now, I want to tell you why I'm so partial on this. Okay? So you know where I'm coming from. That sounds like a pretty nice thing for a pastor to ask, don't you think? Yes? I mean, that sounds like a pretty pastoral thing to do. Pastor Galatia, I can see you do that. You know what she said to me? Pastor, I'm a nice girl. I said, what's that got to do with anything? She goes, you don't understand. I'm a nice girl. I grew up in church. And I don't associate with that kind of people. You remember the story of Jesus and that prostitute that came there? While he was eating, threw herself on his feet and washed his feet with her hair and her tears. And the religious man that he was sitting with, the Pharisee, smiled to himself, like smirked, and said, if he were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman that was. And Jesus said, those who have been forgiven much love much. And those who have been forgiven little love little. What Brenda was telling me was that she was a nice girl and that she didn't have much to be forgiven. So therefore she had little love. Folks, I'm just saying to you, this world is so filled with brokenness and shame that if you think for 1/2 minute, in other words, if your theology is so shaped that if you touch a prostitute or a homosexual or a transvestite or any other, drug addict or herpes-infested, AIDS-infested person, that you yourself will be polluted by their sin, Jesus is not in you. When Jesus touches a homosexual, or Jesus touches a transgender, or Jesus touches someone with AIDS, or Jesus touches the prostitute, or Jesus touches the little child who's working as a male prostitute in the streets of Manila because it's the only way he can survive. And God himself through Jesus touches them. Jesus is not defiled. Amen. They're purified. Should you have boundaries? Of course. Should you beware? Of course. But if you're not concerned about that little boy wandering the streets of Manila, selling his body, he's not gay, he's not a homosexual, he's just giving sex to men who will abuse and exploit him. Goes home to some pimp that beats the snot out of him, takes all of his money and tells him to go out and do it again. And you say, I don't know about those people. We're nice people. I'm a nice boy. Then you're not seeing the world that Jesus sees. You are not seeing the world that Jesus sees. And the church continues to gather in our little holy huddle circle, and we compliment each other on how well we do certain things in ministry, and certainly I'm not against it. I'm not saying anything is wrong with that, except that can't be the focus. The focus has to be, for God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, and whosoever shall believe in him shall not die, but shall have everlasting life. And the church is the agency, the administration of God's grace and mercy on the earth, and we are the agency of reconciliation, as though God were making his appeal through us. And if we're only appealing to one another about God's love, who we have already received. Okay, so now you want to know how to catch the next generation. You do that. You know why? You know why the next generation will be interested in that? Because they see that's what's necessary. And when they see Grandma and Grandpa show up at some event, how long do I have in my time? 9:30. I shall have it down out about 3 minutes. When they see Grandma and Grandpa show up someplace that's risky, and everyone in the church is saying, oh, we don't go there. Now look at it. You don't go there to participate in evil. Okay, right? You know, that's not why you're showing. Hey, I'm showed up at the bar so I can drink and get, no. But you stand outside the bar and you say, here's what, I'm not saying you do this, I'm just saying you could, right? You stand outside and you go, who are the people who are broken? Let me tell you a short quick one, okay? So I had a friend who lived a homosexual lifestyle. He received Jesus one morning gloriously on Easter Sunday morning, transformed his life, boom. He's now a missionary to people with AIDS. He says, Dutch, I want you to come back. He just wrote me. Remember my friend Lance Hastings? Did I ever tell you about him? Anyway, he calls me and he says, come down to Key West, which is the homosexual capital of the world. And he says, come down to Key West, I want to show you around. I'm ministering to people with AIDS down here. And so we went around at night and saw all the perversions and everything you could possibly see. And it was sickening and horrifying. And he said, I just wanted you to see that. He says, now tomorrow morning we're going to get up in the morning early. And he says, and we're going to go here. And I said, what for? He goes, you'll see. And so we drove to this place where he was going to pick up all of these AIDS guys and gals and take them to the treatment center. And I said, isn't that the same person that I saw dancing on a bar? Isn't that the same person that I saw impersonating a female? Isn't that the same person that I saw? Yes, yes. And they walk out of those homes broken, their lives shattered, humiliated by their behavior the night before. And my friend would get them all in the car and have a little canister of coffee and drive them to the AIDS, treatment station, place in Key West. And he would pray for them, he would love them. And I thought to myself, God, thank you for letting me see not just the raucous vileness of sin in someone's life when they express it, but the brokenness and the devastation that sin has on someone's life as they live it. And I pray that you'd be able to see that too. Amen. God bless you.